Hello, I am Rebecca Burgess, a UK comic artist and illustrator, and a member of Sweatdrop Studios. In this video, I want to show you how a range of techniques can be used to colour both foreground and background images. The nice thing about chameleon pens is that they're very diverse, so if, say, you want to create comics or full illustrations that have backgrounds with them, then it's quite easy to use chameleon pens without anything else, without any other kind of medium, which is nice because most markers, because they're very strong normally and you can't change the consistency of them, you can only use them for a foreground or a background, and then you have to use a different kind of medium to create other aspects of the picture. But with chameleon pens, you can use a completely the same medium throughout the whole image, which creates consistency. Okay, so to make the foreground characters stand out from the background, I'm actually just going to use solid colour without using the blender aspect of chameleon pen at all. So for this little fox, I'm going to use RD4 Crimson Red. So with foreground colouring, I don't do anything special, I just sort of fill it in like you would with any other kind of marker. For the cherry blossoms, because they're very small, I'm gonna use the smaller nib for them, the PK3, and again without any blending, just the pen by itself, just so that they'd stand out from the background. So now that I've finished with the foreground characters, I'm going to move on to the background, and here I'm actually going to use the blender aspect of the chameleon marker. For the whole of the background, I'm gonna keep the blender on the pen for 25 seconds. I'm gonna start with the cherry blossom on the tree, which I've just done a very light outline for, which you'll have in the picture that you could colour yourself. I keep going with the same marks until the pen reaches its original colour, and then I blend it again for another 25 seconds. To help create depth, I choose one side to be lighter than the other, which is what I'm doing here. So I'd start with the light side and just sort of go over the same area. It kind of helps to create shape for the background, so in order to create that sort of shape and depth that the cherry blossoms have without actually drawing anything, I just sort of have the difference between light and dark, creating the same sort of marks over and over again, the sort of shape of the lines that I've made there, so you could just follow the lines over and over again, and it helps create the same markings but darker and darker over the time, so that you have different layers of markings, all creating the same shape but with different shade. So to help bring out the sense of shape on the cherry blossom trees even more, I'm going to use a darker shade of pink with a different chameleon marker, and do the same thing, blend it for 25 seconds, and then pretty much just do the same thing but over the top of the existing. Because of the blender added in the colour, it kind of blends in already, since I'm applying it on top of it so quickly afterwards. When applying the darker shade, I avoid the lighter area, so I go over the existing colouring from the PK3, but I kind of go a little further up so that I'm creating a blend of the two colours. So now I am filling in the tree, and I use the same kind of shapes as the tree, like recreating the shape of the tree with the BR2 marker. And that's pretty much what I do for the rest of the background. I just blend for 25 seconds and then keep going over and over with the various pens and layering up a little bit and creating the different shapes. With each of the different parts of the background, I think about the shadow each time, so I'm keeping the light on the left side, but just underneath the tree there, where the cherry blossom would cast a shadow over the tree trunk, I add a little bit of extra shadow just with the marker that's pretty much at its darkest now. For the sky background, if you're doing comics or panels, it's kind of nice to start darker around the edge of the panel and then get lighter as you go in. In this particular background, it's supposed to be raining, so I kind of use the same technique that I've been using for the tree and the rest of the background. With the rain, I kind of, in the middle of the image, just keep making marks of that create the shape of rain, as sort of downward strokes that help create the shape of rain. For the ground, I'm using the same technique again, which I'll just use throughout the whole background, but I'm using a very light colour, OL3. This is just to stop the image from being overwhelming. I think this is an important thing to think about when you're doing comics or illustration backgrounds. For the reflection in the puddle, I am going to take the original colour of the foreground fox, blend it for 25 seconds again, and then just very, very lightly add it in just a tiny little bit at the edge of that puddle so that it's acting as a reflection. This works really well. Like, chameleon pens are very good for this sort of effect. It almost looks like you're using watercolour, and it blends very well with the grey that I used for the puddle, because the blender is still quite fresh there. Because the background has a lot of emphasis on light and shade, I think the foreground image should also have some shade added to it rather than just plain colour. So to do this, I'm gonna take the BR5 pen and just use the smaller nib, not the brush nib, and just add a little bit of crosshatch to help give the foreground character shade. But also it makes it stand out because I'm not using the blender like in the background. I'm using something a bit more solid, which helps add to the solidness of the foreground colouring that I used. I also use a CG8 pen to add the same kind of crosshatch shade for the white areas of the fox. And for the rest of the other 3 pictures in this little set, you pretty much do the same thing. Just single pen technique for the foreground character, 25-second blending for the background and layering of the background, and then using the small nib just at the end to add shading to the foreground characters.